Well, good afternoon. This is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on Sunday the 26th of November, and it just happens to be a Grey Cup weekend. The Calgary Stampeders against the Toronto Argonauts, and it should be a great game. My money's on the Argonauts, although the Stampeders, they're coming in kind of tough. I can tell you that. It will be a good, tight game. There's no doubt about that. So I've been getting ready all day, taking care of a few chores because I'm going to a Grey Cup party later on this afternoon. But I did want to do a wrap-up of the week's news and a follow-up on some of the stories that we've been talking about. And one that I am really pleased to see is this Lindsay Shepherd story with Jordan Peterson, the Jordan Peterson clip at Wilfrid Laurier University. There has now come out that several professors at the universities have started a petition to promote free speech in the university based on the Chicago model, which has basically announced that universities should not be safe, and they absolutely shouldn't. It's a place where you explore dangerous new ideas, and that can be quite unsettling. So if you want to move forward, I would suggest that, well, everyone just get over that. There was also a rally where she spoke, and there was about, I think, 150, 200 people showed up, and a small contingent of social justice warriors who stood on the opposite side of the road and remained reasonably silent during the whole affair. But one of the things that really has happened is that just about every newspaper I read this week, all of the editorials, all of the guest speaker pieces were about freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And I think they're realizing that this is the end goal. What happened at that university in that private room where an ad hoc tribunal sat down and tried to conjure this woman into being biased towards the left side of the argument and ignoring the right side of the argument. And this is a microcosm of where this is going. This is where these radical leftists want to take us into Marxist doctrine. As I said before, if they could have swished this girl off into a gulag for a little bit of attitude adjustment, they'd have done so in a heartbeat. Can you imagine these people running the country? Well, actually they are running the country. This is, you can see with the members of Trudeau's cabinet that there are an awful lot of people who think just like this by the way they behave, okay, and the things that they support. And so we're going down a route which could get an awful lot worse. But not only with the Liberals, but the NDP. I mean, there was an incident earlier this year where Justin Trudeau touched a woman on the shoulder, and the NDP were screaming that he'd assaulted her and how dare he handle this woman and blah 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 blah. He wanted to go between two people. She was on one side. He touched her shoulder to say excuse me, and of course we're in this era of fake outrage. Okay, and I think we're all getting just a little bit tired of it. Can we all just calm down a little bit here, come back to the real world? But having the editors of the national newspapers on board with this, I think is really going to push this forward, because it's gone farther than I could ever have imagined. And the positions that these people who are driving this agenda to shut down free speech unless it agrees with their idea of free speech is very, very difficult, especially for the individual. Yes, I can make some YouTube videos and talk about it and try and reach out, but I got to work a full-time job. And that's one of the big problems in our society today, is it's really difficult to actually find the time to do something, because we're all just so wrapped up with paying the bills, putting food on the table, and taking care of that kind of stuff. So let's hope this continues, and let's hope that we can get some rational thought going on here. Okay, so first up in the news today is This is a follow-up to the story of Mad Mike Hughes, who was going to take off and fly over the Mojave Desert and prove the Earth is flat. And unfortunately, he had to cancel his plans. The Bureau of Land Management told me they would not allow me to do the event, at least not at that location, Hughes said in a YouTube announcement amid international attention over his plans to launch into the Atmos flat. Whoa, I like that word, the Atmos flat. Wow. And in a similar line of stupidity, here we have Sunday Express: mum demands school bans Sleeping Beauty because she didn't consent to being kissed. This is another absolute bout of nonsense. I think it's a specific issue in the Sleeping Beauty story about sexual behavior and consent. I mean, come on. Are you being serious here? Sleeping Beauty? I don't think that the kind of age group that looks at this kind of movie and or watches this kind of story, I don't think is looking at it from that context. And I've always taken it as the magic of a kiss, because that's what happens. And there's obviously no issue because they get married in the end, for goodness sake. So, wow. Now, I came across this little story on Zero Hedge. There is just one thing preventing Elon Musk's vision of coming true: the law of physics. And I will put this link in the show notes. But the problem seems to be the battery life, performance and size. Now, battery prices are coming down. You can see these are the predicted prices of batteries, $1,000 per kilowatt hour, 2030. But this project has sucked so much money out of Tesla. It is absolutely unbelievable. There's been lots of issues with the software, and of course the incredible shrinking battery pack. Now, basically you have to get out to 2030 before they can fulfill the kind of promises they've made about the new Roadster and the new truck, which has been ordered by Walmart. Musk made similarly lofty claims about the battery life and performance of both vehicles. The Tesla semi-trucks, he said, would be able to travel for 500 miles on a single charge. The Roadster could clock a staggering 620 miles, more than double the closest challenger. There was just one problem. As Tesla fans would later find out, courtesy of Bloomberg, none of it was true. In fact, many of the promises defy the capabilities of modern battery technology. Take the Tesla Semi. Musk vowed it would haul an unprecedented 80,000 pounds for 500 miles on a single charge, then recharge 400 miles of range in 30 minutes. Okay, so this would require, based on Bloomberg estimates, a charging system that's 10 times more powerful than one of the fastest battery charging networks on the road today, Tesla's own superchargers. I don't think they're lying, Jaffe said. I just think they've left something out of the public reveal that would have explained how these numbers work. So another issue that we're not talking about with electric cars is I was talking to a senior manager with Hydro One, and we got talking about electric cars and charging and so on and so forth, and he started to chuckle, and I asked him why, and he said, well, you know, before we can really even think about having even 50% of the cars in Ontario electric, you have to replace or upgrade the entire grid network. And he approximated that would take 25 to 30 years, which was put us around about 2050. Now, I mean, I don't want to take away from this stuff because, you know, I think that technology in this area is great, and I think there is lots of advancements to be made. But again, I don't think they're quite letting everyone know exactly how all this is going to work. I mean, just for example, just a quick example, if you go down the 401 and you look at the number of cars traveling down that highway and imagine how many charging stations you would have to have in a in a highway service center, it would be staggering. It would be absolutely staggering. And 20 to 30 minute charge up time, well, you could be waiting 2 or 3 hours. Now, I'm not saying this can't happen, but one of the things I think we take very much for granted in our society is that on every corner there is a gas station. I live in a village of 3,700 people, and we have 4 gas stations in the village. 4. And a card lock up at one of the fuel places. And not 20 kilometres away, Fenton Falls, there's another 2 gas stations. So, everywhere you go, there is the availability of gasoline and diesel. But the electric charger car, I know you can do it at home, but things happen. I can see more of a use for a hybrid in Canada, especially with the temperatures we have here. We have a gas engine or a diesel engine running a generator, and that generator charges the battery as you're traveling. Another issue with Tesla is the long-serving battery tech chief has stepped down. Kurt Kelty departs just as Model 3 production hell ramps up. So Kelty was a giant in the battery world. He worked for Panasonic for 15 years. He was the lead negotiator with Panasonic for the facility, according to LinkedIn. And he also was awarded Battery Innovator of the Year. And so he is pretty key solving the battery problems with Tesla. And anyway, he has gone on to explore new opportunities. But this is not going to bode well for Tesla. So this I thought was kind of interesting. Another story from Zero Hedge, and kudos to Zero Hedge. This is a great site for information. If you want to go to a great news, what would you call it? Correlator. The stories that go through Zero Hedge every day, it's hard to keep up with. Anyway, we just don't trust each other anymore, and I've talked about this before, but this is incredibly important. Despite an uptick over the past year, Americans' trust in the key institutions is fading. Congress, big business, national news outlets, the criminal justice system, the organizations that influence our public life most are those least trusted. Events in recent days are guaranteed to worsen domestic relations. Truth in character is a diminishing trait. Blame as ever lies on both sides. Washington Post columnist Michael Gerson latest offering highlights the abundance of lies coming from the White House. Everything from failed campaign disclosures to clumsy press hearings. The Washington Post columnist Michael Gerson's latest offering highlights the abundance of lies coming from the White House. Everything from failed campaign disclosures to clumsy press hearing answers get Gerson's goat. A swamp scribbler par excellence, the Post writer embodies establishment opinion on Trump, and while his criticisms are overwrought, the Trump administration no more frames facts to create a more favourable image than its predecessor. They represent how many liberals view the president. For the sins of hypocrisy on the right, the left is equally guilty, if not more. Liberals' recent about-face on Bill Clinton's sexual predation is the mea culpa of the 21st century. For decades, Democrat operatives and media flunkies have waved away charges that Clinton raped, fondled, and aggressively pursued women other than his wife. The outing of Harvey Weinstein as a gross pervert challenged all that. The smutty scandal, unearthed by Roman Farrow, was more than sordid, with revelations of Hollywood hijinks. It's become a cultural turning point. Going forward, we'll look back on the pre-Weinstein days as a time more innocent and less corrupt, fictive as it was. As liberals come forth to express contrition over doubting Clinton's victims, it's hard to take their compunction seriously, especially when they waged a propaganda war painting Republicans as theocratic tyrants who want all women to return to the detestable model of June Cleaver. Chris Hayes, Matthew Iglesias, Michelle Goldberg and others are playing the public for fools if they think that 20 years of playing offensive line for QB Willie will be easily forgotten. Then there's Lena Dunham, the boisterous voice of social conscious millennials. The girl's creator has championed herself as a voice of women and an ally of the abused, until it came knocking on her own door. When a writer for her own hit show was accused of raping actress Aurora Perrineau, Dunham snapped to his defense, tweeting, "The first tenet of my politics is to hold up the people who have held me up." Not a bad message, except that Durham once claimed women never lie about rape. This selective feminism isn't doing liberals like Lena any favours. If that wasn't enough, for every woman who celebrated the extinction of white men was just accused of being a closet racist by a colleague. Dunham's a wily example, but not wholly exceptional. Minnesota Senator Al Franken has been accused by 2 women of inappropriate groping. Actor Kevin Spacey was fired from a host of gigs for preying on young men. George Takei is fighting off allegations imposing himself on men. Russell Simmons has been outed for forcing a 17-year-old to perform oral sex on him. All share a common characteristic. They are all outspoken leftists. There is a devious pattern to all of this. Many of the most vocal ideologues end up hiding dark secrets. This sanctimony makes it harder to accept our imperfect nature and in turn see one another for genuine people to work things out with. In Eugene O'Neill's Christian-themed play Days Without End, the demonic doppelganger, Loving, mocks the protagonist's search for higher meaning, declaring that there is not truth for men, that human life is unimportant and meaningless. Without truth, we are base creatures festering in a bloody power struggle. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom, writes Timothy Snyder. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. It isn't just a spectacle, it's a dark void without purpose, and if man lacks purpose, his country by default must as well. At their core, nations are composed of a shared set of truths. When those beliefs diverge to the point of irreconcilability, a schism becomes inevitable. Divided houses cannot stand. The moral hypocrisy on display by the country's leading influencers is shredding what little commonality Americans still have. How can a society last when its members no longer believe their neighbours are acting in good faith? And I have said this over and over again, that we have to calm down, take a step back, take a deep breath. Trump was elected. Get over it, okay? Stop being so sensitive about everything and blaming everybody for everything that is going wrong. I mean, it is just unbelievable. I am so disappointed that this has been the outcome of the right and the left being driven against each other. Had to bring you this. This is the Coinbase charts page, and Bitcoin is ringing in at a nice little $9,368.31. Ethereum up here, as you can see, is 460.38. That's a $160 increase in just a couple of days, and Litecoin has bounced up to $85. You can see a nice little increase here. Now I have to remind you that in the last cryptocurrency report, Cliff did say expect a very swift drop, and it could be a sizable drop. You could see this drop back down to $6,500, but it's only going to be short. It's going to be over a weekend or a couple of days, and then it's going to bounce right back up again and keep on going until it hits $14,000. So hang on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen, and well, I always say you buy on the dips. Okay, so why is trust so important? I keep harping back on this because it is so foundational. If you think about it for a second, you are not going to do any kind of dealings with someone you don't trust. Or if you are absolutely forced to do dealing, you will only do the absolute minimum amount of dealing that you have to. And of course, this is why you're seeing people flocking into things like Bitcoin, why people are going onto the internet to do their research, why government actually has really just become a laughing stock. The justice system is a sorry state. You know, to bring a class action suit in a constitutional matter, you have to come up with about $1.5 million just to get it off the ground. And so many things, as with Hydro One, for example, in Ontario, they are breaking the Constitution. They put these trespassing technology smart meters on our walls. That is an absolute contradiction to your constitutional right of privacy within your own home. But to challenge Hydro as to why we didn't get an opt-in, as I say, it's going to cost you about $1.5 million just to start. So really, although we do have a justice system, to all intents and purposes, it's not accessible to the average person. Unless you have a huge group. I guess crowdfunding has helped to do this kind of stuff, but it's still a pretty hard slog. It should not be that difficult to address this kind of stuff in the justice system. And why is that a problem? Is because the justice system is absolutely clogged up with cases of people who are forced to self-rep or self-represent because they cannot afford a lawyer. If you want to get legal aid in Ontario, you basically have to be earning less than $100 a week. And they of course know that unless you're living at home and collecting single welfare benefits, and even then you might not qualify. Okay, so people are forced into self-representing, and that's not an issue, except that it's really hard to navigate the system, and the system doesn't provide you with the information that you need. It's not that difficult. Once you know what they want, but they won't tell you what they want. And so you have to go in there, you have to keep on guessing and playing this stupid game. Why they just don't put that information out there and make it easily available to everybody. You can self-represent. I have self-represented, and I have successfully self-represented in court. So it is possible. I'd say my biggest heartache, and I am going to do a video about this for people who are going to try and self-represent, to just give you some of the basics of where to look and who to ask, and the websites that you will need to access. All the things that I basically had to pull kicking and screaming out of people down at the courthouse. And no, everyone thinks they're giving you legal advice. They're just scared to death of giving you legal advice. Okay, so if we don't have a court system that is available and accessible to all, and after all we do pay for that legal system, that justice system that comes out of our tax dollars, okay, just as we're paying for these university lecturers. These are tax dollar supported. Teaching an ideology of division, again, is fragmenting our society. And remember, as it said in the article, a house divided cannot stand. At the end of the day, we have to contact each other, we have to communicate with each other on the street, we have to work side by side, and that is not going to work well if we're doing it with a chip on our shoulder, or with a heaviness in our heart and a sense of animosity to our work partners or our home partners. And you see, one of the things I'm very concerned about with this situation is there is a thing in psychology called transference. Okay, and what that means is, okay, you say for example, you get angry and frustrated at your boss at work, but because your position is not one where you can retaliate, you just have to suck up and take it. Well, then you go out into the real world, and some poor innocent ticket collector gives you a sideways glance and you blow up because they're accessible. Okay, so that's what happens when we transfer that anger and frustration. Okay, so we're living in a situation now, inflation is really starting to ramp up. The cost of real goods, the things that you really need in your life, are accelerating really quickly. I can see people having difficulty. I even see myself, the cost of living is just, things that cost, $6 just a little while ago now cost $10. It's just staggering how quickly this is happening. And this leads to frustration because you can't change that. Who are you going to call to try and stop inflation as an individual? You can't call your MPP, you can't call your MP, you can't call the Bank of Canada, you can't call the Prime Minister, all of these, you can't call the banks, all of these institutions, all of these people are totally inaccessible. Okay, so the frustration mounts, the frustration rises, and then they throw into the mix all of these divisive issues. And I still believe that the Trump-Clinton election was exactly that. because look at the polarization that has happened since that election. And so everyone is taking their collective anger at their frustration at not being able to change the situation on the ground, their physical situation, like the cost of living and that kind of stuff. And so they're funneling it through these platforms like Antifa, Black Lives Matter, postmodernist feminism, these angry people. And it's spreading. And if we don't stop fighting amongst ourselves, they, and who I mean by they is the elites, the people who are immune from all of this, they are going to walk away scot-free. They're the people who caused all of this. You can never forget that. The bankers, the banking institution is probably the key player in all of this, has caused all of this situation. And all of the elites are connected to the banking system one way or another. And they've created a situation of tension, and they know it. And they know that the problem in the past, when you can't break the inflation cycle. Okay, see, what they used to do was have a Jubilee Day. That's how they break the inflation cycle. They would just cancel all debt. But as I said before, I don't believe that is possible in this day and age, with the mortgage-backed securities dividing mortgages into ever decreasing pieces of security. It's hard to put that back together again. And so they know that their story ends with pitchforks and lanterns coming down the street. So what they've decided to do, because they now control the media, they now control the government, and if you don't believe that, take a look at this picture. And we're buying it. We're falling into this trap. I can see it. It is so frustrating to sit here and watch this unfold, because that's why it's being done. These people know the outcome is predictable, that we will end up fighting with each other and squabbling over issues that are not the point at all. I mean, yes, I'm not saying that all the issues are completely invalid, but this is like coming into your home and finding water all over the floor, and you immediately get out the mops and you start cleaning up all that water, and you clean hard, you work hard, you're working diligently, you're doing good work. You're trying to save the home. However, as long as that tap is running, your job will never end and you will never solve the problem. And that's the situation with banking. Until you stop fractional reserve and exponential growth of interest, you will never ever stop inflation, and you will never ever stop this cycle of boom and bust. And in these cycles of boom and bust, people get crushed. Lots of people get crushed, because lots of people, like the casino, lots of people have to lose so few people can win. So what I'm hoping is that I can get you to ponder why we need to trust each other, why we need to take a step back, and why this is not just another story, and why this is so important. I mean, I think our entire survival is going to depend on our ability to work together. The world is changing, the climate is changing. Whichever way it goes, in temperature, up or down, we are looking at a tenuous future. And to be quite honest with you, when you look back in history, this has been the norm. What we've had for the last 150 years is exceptional. It's the exception, not the rule. The rule has been bouncing along from starvation episode to starvation episode. Okay, so if we don't start thinking about how we're going to keep this thing running along, we can't. It's going to be really hard to go back. It's going to be hard to go back. Okay, so you have a great weekend. Please like and subscribe below. Click that little bell so you get all of the updates coming along, and we will talk to you very soon. Take care now. Bye.